offend anyone with this video. It is not also our intention to suggest, insinuate, or preach hate towards any group, race, tribe, or person. The goal of this video is for you to look for the books, journals, magazines, or other publications referenced and study them yourself. Remember, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Garvey. This video is not for entertainment. It's not for views. It's not for thumbs up or down. It's not a propaganda video. It's not for popularity. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. So what were the Negroes like before the slave trade of between 1434 to 1900? Now remember, the slave trade started circa 1434 and ended in that format circa 1900, and it was when the Muslims, Christians, and Jews connived to be capturing the Negroes, who they then classified as pagans, and selling them amongst themselves. So before we delve into today's topic, we ask you the following questions. Do you find time to read? Do you ask basic questions from what you read? Do you understand why you need to read? Do you know why the slave masters invest more on media than anything else? Let us show you why you really need to study. Have you ever tried to find out the number of Negroes captured and sold as slaves between 1434 and 1900? Have you tried to understand why, despite their number, the Negroes could not transfer their own culture to the new land? Have you tried to understand what food the Negroes ate prior to the slave trade? And have you tried to find out what clothes they wore, or which god they worshipped, or what their religion was, or their way of life prior to the slave trade? Remember, it does not benefit us if you share these videos or give us thumbs up or down, or even subscribe to the channel if you do not look for the materials referenced and study them yourself. This is very important. That way you will be able to understand the lies of the slave master and how it works. The slave master's lies follow only one particular pattern, and when you study these materials, you will be able to reconcile what they tell you with what the books and the records are saying. Remember, the slave master is not smarter than you. He is only playing smarter than you because you allow him to feed you with his lies. If you could go out of the way, study the materials yourself, read them, and understand what those who witnessed the atrocities are saying, that way the slave master can no longer deceive you, and indeed deceive all of us. But let us move forward. Have you ever heard about the so-called Hebrew Israelites? And you hear them say Yah or Jah is the name of the creator of heaven and earth. And they also allege that Yah is behind their suffering and slavery because they disobeyed Yah. They also allege that the period of their slavery would be 400 years according to Yah. That's 1619 to 2019. And have you ever wondered where the so-called Hebrew Israelites got the name Yah from? How they can base their faith and belief in the slave master's books and writings? And if they researched before they arrived at such conclusions, and where they got J from, since there was no J when the Bible was written, and what Yah translates to in the original language of the Bible or the original language of the Negroes, whatever it is, because there are numerous languages of the Negroes. So why must it be one, and which language could it have been found from? So the name Yah is found in Psalm 68 verse 4, which says, "Sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name Yah, and rejoice before him." Yah also is the short for Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, or other derivatives of it. But our question becomes, what does the name Yah translate to in any Negro language or in the original language of the Bible? This is the big question. And remember, if it is found in Psalms that was written by David, what were the people before David calling the creator of heaven and earth? This should be our anchor point. And this is why you have to read things yourself. Read them yourself and understand where whoever is talking is coming from. Don't just listen to what they are saying. Try and also listen to what they are not saying. So let us reference the Bible in 1606 so that you remember that the slave trade started circa 1434. So the person telling us that the name of the creator of heaven and earth can never be Yah. Let us see what the name was like at that time. That is the Bible as at 1606. So from here we see that the spelling of the name they call Yah is I-A-H, meaning that it wasn't the same thing at that time. So let us also take another look somewhere else. So from the Bible in 1611, that's the King James Version of the Bible. Remember, the King James Version wasn't the first Bible, but just that it aligned closely with the slave master's slave trade. That was why it was adopted and popularized. So let us see what it says about the same name. So here again we see from the same Psalm 68 verse 4 that the name is I-A-H. That's I as in India, A as in Alpha, and H as in hotel. That is Aya or whatever, but it's certainly not Yah. So where are they getting this from? And this is why you have to read stuff for yourself. Don't dwell or depend on anyone to do the reading for you. Now, what does Jah or Yah mean in any Negro language that made these people adopt it, or where could they have gotten it from? So let us reference the history, civil and commercial, of the British colonies in the West Indies by Brian Edwards, Esquire, in 3 volumes, 3rd edition, volume 3, and it was published in 1801. We see the following. So here we see from just above the highlighted portion, Saturday, December 10, this day as usual, a half holiday from 12 o'clock for the Negroes. Then Friday, December 16, 3 Guinea ships being in the harbor full of slaves from Africa. I testified a wish to visit the ships previous to the sale. I would have visited them privately and unexpectedly, but it was not practicable. Everything was prepared for our visit, and the least observing eye might have discovered. In particular, I was disgusted with a general jumping or dancing of the Negroes on the deck, which some, and perhaps many of them, did voluntarily, but some under force or control. For I saw a sailor more than once catch those rudely by the arm who had ceased dancing, and by gesture menace them to repeat their motion, to clap their hands and shout their song of Yah, Yah, which I understood to mean friends. Independent of this, and when I insisted on the dance being stopped, I must say that the people, with exception to one single woman, perhaps ill, seemed under no apprehensions and were even cheerful for the most part, and all anxious to go ashore, being fully appraised of what would be their situation and employment when landed by some of their countrymen who were permitted to visit them from the plantations for that purpose. So we see where they got the Yah from. So now let us examine their 400 years claim. Remember, they allege or claim that their slavery started around 1619 when the first slaves or Negro slaves were landed in the United States. They discounted all the years prior when Negro slaves were shipped to the Caribbean, to Brazil, to Europe, to Middle East, and all the other parts of the world where the Negroes were being sold as beasts of burden. So they started their own counting from 1619. So we will do that by looking at the calendar at that time to see if it's possible that they are correct. Meanwhile, if you have doubts as to when the slave trade started, we're going to make 1 or 2 references to buttress our own point. So if we reference the history of slavery and the slave trade, ancient and modern, published 1860, we say the following. So reading from just above the highlighted portion, it says, before the year 1470, the whole of the Guinea coast had been explored. As early as 1434, Antonio Gonzalez, a Portuguese captain, landed on this coast and carried away with him some Negro boys whom he sold to 1 or 2 Moorish families in the south of Spain. The act seems to have provoked some criticism at the time, but from that day it became customary for the captains of vessels landing on the Gold Coast or other parts of the coast of Guinea to carry away a few young Negroes of both sexes. So you see, when it started, our interest here is 1434. That was when it started. So in order to get the right context and to see how it was commercialized, you see that at first the deportation of slaves from Africa was conducted on a limited scale. But about 70 years after Gonzalez had carried away the first Negro boys from the Guinea coast, an opening was all at once made for Negro labor, which made it necessary to carry away blacks not by occasional shiploads but by thousands annually. So you see that it moved from 1 or 2 to thousands. So you see the progression, you see how it advanced. So when they are telling you 1619, you see that it is clearly out of ignorance. But we're going to look at the calendar at that time to show that there is no way their 1619 or 400 years allegation can be correct. So if the slave trade started circa 1434 and lasted up to 1900, that's already 466 years. So which calendar are they basing their calculation on, and what criteria are they using to discount the years of Negro slavery prior to 1619 when the first slaves landed in the United States? So you will notice a very selfish approach to the whole thing. The Negroes and the Hebrew Israelites in the United States think that they are the only Negroes. So they become Hebrew Israelites and start counting from 1619. They do not even notice that the Europeans that are coming from Europe to the United States are still coming generations and generations after to be their lords. They've not noticed that. So let us look at what calendar they could have used and what criteria are they using to discount the years prior to 1619. So if we go again to the 1611 KJV, that's King James Version of the Bible, to look at the calendar at that time, we're going to see something of interest. So we see from the calendar that January has 31 days and that the moon or lunar calendar has 30 days. So here again we see that February has 28 days and the lunar based calendar has 29 days. We wouldn't know when they first introduced the so-called leap year, so whether it's a leap year or not, but we notice that February has 28 and the lunar based calendar has 29, and March has 31 days while the lunar based calendar has 30 days. This is KJV 1611. So here again we see that April has 30 days while the moon cycle is 29 days, and May has 31 days while the moon cycle is 30 days. Remember, at that time and prior to these slave masters calendar system, they used the moons to calculate time. And remember, if you are those that believe in the so-called Antichrist, you remember that it was said that it was going to change times, laws, and seasons. So you will need to tell us what laws, times, and seasons the Abrahamic religions have not changed. So here again we see that June had 30 days while the lunar based calendar had 29 days, and July had 31 days while the lunar based calendar is 30 days. Remember, the so-called Judaism in Israel, they have their own year. The so-called Islamic religion, they have their own year. So we will take this to be the Christian own based year. So where are the Negroes' own years? Where are they getting their calculations from? Will the Most High be calculating the 400 years from the Islamic calendar or the Judaism calendar or this type of calendar or the old one? So you see that that whole concept is faulty. It's not correct and it cannot be correct. So here again we see that December had 31 days while the lunar based calendar has it as 30 days, and the almanac for 39 years was given on the right side of the page. So we see from 1603 to 1641 the important dates, but our interest here is what they called the golden number. So we see what it tells us about the golden number. It says the golden number is so called because it was written in the calendar with letters of gold. By who, if we asked? Right at the day whereon the moon changed, and it is the space of 19 years, in the which the moon returneth to the self same day of the year of the sun, and therefore is also called the cycle of the moon, in the which the solstices and equinoctials do return to all one point in the zodiac. To find it every year, you must add 1 year to the year of Christ, for Christ was born 1 year of the 19 already past. Then divide the whole by 19, and that which left it is the golden number for that year. If there is no suffrage or whatever, it is then 19. So you also see what they said about the epoch and the use of the epoch. It says it is to know how old the moon is at any time, or ever by the epoch, do thus, and whatever they are writing. Our interest is to show you that there is no way the 400-year calculation of those so-called Hebrew Israelites can be correct, because times have changed. The Most High Creator of heaven and earth is never an author of confusion. So there is no way you can be using man-made things to be calculating his own time. It doesn't work. And you don't even know who presented all these facts, whether it be their own or your own. So have you ever looked at the number of Negroes shipped to the United States alone, and to other parts of the world as well, and you wonder why they have no culture? None of their food is left or in the stable of the United States. So their God is not there either. All the things they did were thrown away. Their dressing, everything, they copied the slave masters, everything, including his religion, to the point of now saying the Most High could have ordained them for slavery, and that is what they are suffering. Now think about it. So someone who was born in 1619 or 1720 or even 1900 would have lived and died a slave, and we have no share in the liberty they are looking for in 2019. And these are times and dates calculated and fixed by the slave masters. So you understand why the Chinese have their own New Year, the Japanese probably have theirs, the Muslims have theirs, the Jews have theirs. The slave masters' own is what the so-called Hebrew Israelites and other Negroes are using to calculate their own. This should tell you where what is wrong is, where we need to look at to correct any mistakes we have made as a people. But let us reference The African Slave Trade and Its Remedy by Thomas Powell Buxton, Esquire, and it was published in 1840. We see the following. So from here we see that the number of slaves taken from the Bight of Benin and Biafra alone annually was about 140,000. So what we ask is, how come they were not able to keep their religion, they were not able to keep their culture, they were not able to keep their mode of dressing or their food or something in the slave masters area? So we are not blaming them, but the question has to be asked, because we understand that they were stolen. And there was nothing like Africans sold other Africans, as you see them pay people like Professor Gates or Omar Johnson to be telling people. So we need to understand who the Negroes are and how different they are. You remember recently the slave master went and paid somebody in Ghana to tell everyone that they were apologizing for the slave trade. Now ask yourself, why are the governments there not apologizing? Why is it that when Negroes are killed in South Africa or in United States, killed by the police, none of the governments there issue any condemnation? That's because they know that the Negroes are totally different from the others. We give you an example. Look at the Bight of Biafra thing here. Have you seen any of the so-called descendants of former slaves ask, what is it about this Biafra we hear? Are you telling us that of this 140,000 taken annually, this book was published in 1840? Are you telling us that none of these so-called descendants of former slaves could have been from there? So here we see that in Texas, in a year, about 15,000 Negroes were imported from Africa into Texas around 1838. So the question becomes, if these numbers were coming in, how come they couldn't retain any of their cultures? So here again, we see that the slave population, as I learned from statistical accounts, amounted in the year 1828 to 301,000. Therefore, with an average annual decrease of at least 8.5%, it ought in the year 1830 to have amounted to 252,006, or nearly that. Whereas on the same authority, I find it increased to 479,000 leaving an excess which nothing but the slave trade can account for, of 226,994. So you see that the number of slaves were so large to have been able to form a country or a community. Now, we remember they were in servitude, but what we are talking about is their ability to keep some of their cultures. Now, remember, their religion, their food, their clothing are all lost and continue to be lost. So here we see from the same book we earlier referenced, it says, next in order to the wider Negroes are those from Congo and Angola, whom I consider to have been originally the same people. I can say but little of them that is appropriate and particular, except that they are in general a slender sightly race of a deep and glossy black, a tribe of the Congos excepted, who very nearly resemble the Igbos, and I believe of a disposition naturally mild and docile. They appear to be fitter for domestic service than for field labor. They are said, however, to become expert mechanics, and what is much to their honor, they are supposed to be more strictly honest than many other of the African tribes. Ultimately, we shall establish to you in very clear facts that what they are doing today is making that Africa, the portion of Africa where the Negroes are, a hellhole, so that those Negroes were forced to run out on their own to come and be slaves for them. You notice that they understudied the people very well. They know who they were looking for. In the event you are still one of those who somehow believe that Africans sold other Africans, or that the Negroes could have sold themselves, or how some priests could have captured and sold the slaves, or somehow you believe the slave master that one chief can capture 3,000 people and sell them and they don't mob him. Let us look at the doubts expressed by those who were genuinely concerned about the plight of the Negroes at that time. Remember, it was not every European or every Arab or every Fulani. There were those who were genuinely human and those who were monsters, those who were barbaric. Those are those that also defend and support the lies today. So let us show you that these doubts were there for anyone who looks at the number. The reason they don't tell you anything about the number of people they have stolen is because when you see the number, you will know that it is impossible for the Negroes to have been able to sell themselves. So we see where it tells us that it had been observed in a former chapter that no certain and precise account is easily to be obtained of the means by which the market for slaves is annually kept up and supported in Africa. The several instances that are given of slavery arising from captivity in war, delinquency and debt seem inadequate to so regular and abundant a supply. It is difficult to imagine that casual contributions of this kind can possibly furnish an annual export of 74,000 people. Having an opportunity a few years ago of consulting a very intelligent person on this point, who had visited many parts of the coast and appeared to be a man of veracity and candor, I received from him a writing, an answer which I shall present to my readers verbatim and subjoin such further information as I have been able to collect. So our interest here is the fact that there is no way you can tell us, let's say people like the Arrow can sell 74,000 people and match them over a long distance without horses, without camels. So you see that the reason the lie still subsists and exists today is because the Negroes do not read, and they say the best way to hide something from a black man is actually to write it down in a book. So before we round up, let us reference a book called Universal Geography, or a description of all the parts of the world on a new plan by M. Malta Brown, volume 4, and published 1825. We see the following. Reading from the highlighted portion, it says, the following extract from the Bibliothèque Ophthalmique will give some idea of the horrors of what is called the Middle Passage. The Rhoda smiled from Havre on the 24th of January 1819 for the coast of Africa to purchase slaves. When under the line, it was perceived that the Negroes who were heaped together in the hold and between decks had contracted a considerable inflammation in the eyes. They were successively brought on deck in order that they might breathe a purer air, but it was necessary to discontinue this practice because they threw themselves into the sea, locked in each other's arms. On the arrival of the ship at Guadeloupe, the crew was in a most deplorable condition. Of the Negroes, 39 had become blind and were thrown overboard. So we brought you here to show you the horrors and then to show you how healthy the Negroes were prior to the slave trade. So here we see from the same book that the Negroes, amidst all the varieties of their color and conformation, seldom labor under bodily defects. That means disabilities were not common among Negroes. Their health is kept up by a simple style of living, exercise and perspiration, and among some Negro nations, if not all, infants born with any defect are destroyed. So you see how they came up with that. The Negroes do not seem to have inherited the privilege of the ancient Macrobians. The length of their lives, at least in Senegambia and at Sierra Leone, is not equal to ours, and instances of longevity are very common among the Negroes transported to the colonies, which must belong to some tribes more favored by nature. So again, why we brought you here is that you see that the Negroes were really disabled, but the slave master now concocted the concept of killing disabled children. According to them, they say, oh no, when the child is disabled, they were killed. This was a lie they concocted because they couldn't explain why there were no disabilities among Negroes. Now, if you remember, we told you that the Negroes are not the same as blacks, and that because the slave force are in Ghana or anywhere they are, does not mean the slaves are from there. They are captured from elsewhere. We're going to show you something else about this same story and what the slave master's reaction was. So let us reference the life of Olo de Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African, written by himself, 2 volumes in one. This was the 1837 version. Remember, the book was originally published around 1790, but this is an 1837 print. So you understand what we mean by the Negroes did not have disabilities. So here, from the highlighted portion in blue, it tells us that deformity is indeed unknown among us. I mean that of shape. Numbers of the natives of Igbo now in London might be brought in support. So again, we see that Equiano is telling us that deformity is unknown among them. But what did the slave masters tell us? The slave masters claim that the Negroes killed children that were born deformed. You see how they covered it, they turned it around. So that is why they didn't have deformities. Now if you asked anyone, especially the Negroes in sub-Saharan Africa, they're going to tell you that, oh, Christianity came to stop us from killing twins, to stop us from killing children that were born with defects. Whereas the truth is that defects were not there. Now you might be wondering why, and in subsequent editions, we're going to show you that where they recorded it themselves, that deformity is unknown to the Negroes because of their healthy lifestyle. So Equiano goes further to say, in support of this assertion, for in regard to complexion, ideas of beauty are wholly relative. I remember while in Africa to have seen 3 Negro children who were tawny and another quite white, who were universally regarded by myself and the natives in general, as far as related to their complexions, as deformed. Our women too were in my eye at least uncommonly graceful, alert and modest to a degree of bashfulness, nor do I remember to have heard of an instance of incontinence amongst them before marriage. They are also remarkably cheerful. Indeed, cheerfulness and affability are 2 of the leading characters of our nation. So why we brought you here is to show you what the Negroes were like prior to the slave trade. Now remember, when Equiano wrote this book in 1790s, the slave master came with a propaganda where they stated that he was no longer from Africa, or was born somewhere in one island of Santa Cruz or thereabout. So this should tell you that whenever the slave master has the opportunity, his only words are lies. So if you are running after their religions, expecting some salvation or believing their narratives and lies, we can only say you need to do some research. you need to do some reading. Let us move forward by looking at some of the atrocities of the slave masters with their religions that were unheard of for the Negroes. So let us go back to the book we were looking at earlier before citing Equiano's book, and we'll see some of the atrocities or the things that were happening under the religions of the slave masters. And here it tells us that the Sultan of Begama had married his own sister. An action so contrary to the law could not remain concealed, but came to the knowledge of the Sultan of Borno, who in a paroxysm of wrath ordered him instantly to relinquish the incestuous connection under the penalty of the vengeance of Allah and the emperor. The Sultan of Begama, not suffering himself to be intimidated, sent back the Sultan's letter, writing on the back for an answer that the custom of marrying a sister had existed long before the Prophet, and that he saw no reason why it should not exist after him. An answer so laconic from a dependent raised the emperor's passion to madness. He immediately ordered the vassal Sultan of Moba to enter the Begame country with an invading force, a commission which the latter prince executed, and having vanquished the rebel king, sent him prisoner to Moba. So our interest here is for you to see where a sultan, that is the head of a sultanate, the leader of Muslims, married his own sister, and he had defenses for it. These are things that you couldn't hear about. They were unthinkable in a typical Negro society. So you see why they brought their religions. The religions were actually to deceive Negroes out of true worship and nothing more. So this is why you see them laboring and working together. If you're a Negro and a Christian or a Muslim, watch the body language of the United States, the Europeans, and the Muslims in Nigeria, and the number of slaughters and the killings going on there, and how they are keeping quiet. If you watch it very closely, you will understand that it is the same thing they have been doing, and it is what they are doing right now. Because if you don't know the history, you wouldn't know the future. You wouldn't be able to preempt. You wouldn't be able to even understand the present, let alone preempt or predict the future. So reading from the last paragraph on the left, it tells us that other accounts make the Begama country contain some inhabitants professing the Christian religion, coinciding with a Negro tradition which states that to the east of Hausa, beyond a great lake, there is a nation of Nazarenes. The inhabitants of the country of Adam thus pass for Christians and are said to have pointed teeth. The same shape of the teeth is common among the Janjams, who are pagans and cannibals. The Kendil nation has long hair. So our interest is Christian religion coinciding with a Negro tradition which says that to the east of Hausa, beyond a great lake, there is a nation of Nazarenes. We know what Nazarenes are from the scriptures. And remember, the scriptures, like we have maintained, the Most High, creator of heaven and earth, did not write any book. He also never said he wrote any book. So the belief that because some people, some group came with a book makes them legit or makes them point to the creator of heaven and earth as the object of their worship doesn't hold any water. We hope we have been able to provide you with some thought-provoking issues you can research on. We hope we have also been able to enlighten you. The essence of these videos is not for you to subscribe to the channel. It's not for you to click thumbs up or down. It is for you to look for the materials referenced and study them yourself. Remember, they say the best way to hide something from a black man is to write it down in a book. Do not allow that to be true with you. We thank you very much for listening, and we do hope you will find time to conduct your own research. Peace.